Hello, welcome back. This is Sean for TightPoker.com, and we have our latest strategy video. This time it's a session review for Mr2004. Some of you know we've looked at some of his videos, and he's definitely looking to improve, and he's been watching the videos and studying, and we're seeing some improvement. So we're going to jump right into the stats. This is only, basically 1,100 hands, which means it's just a session. 1,000 hands is definitely not any sort of viable sampling when you think about, well, how's my game looking? Because 1,000 hands is nothing. If you're talking 10,000 hands, then I'd say, okay, yeah, we can definitely take a look at that. But if you just want to look at session stats, that's fine. And that's what we're going to do. And so I thought it would be a little interesting to just look at a small group of hands and see how things went. So overall, he did really well. He's playing 10 no limit, almost won 2 buy-ins in 1,000 hands, which is really good. If you look at his win rate, 8.13, that's not sustainable. It's running hot in terms of maybe you played well and you ran well. Whatever the case may be, don't expect to always win at 8 big bets per 100, especially if you get up into even 25 no limit. I think if you do really, really well, it'll be 4 or 5. And at 15 no limit, if you do really, really well, it'll be at 3 or 4. And then moving forward, if you're at 3, you're crushing the game in today's landscape. So keep that in mind. So looking at the stats, let's just take a look at, the 6 max hands, I'm sure were played actually at full ring tables that dwindled down to 6 players or less. But the thing that jumps out to me here is the huge improvement in VPIP PFR. You'll see that, I remember before it was a pretty wide disparity and that you were probably calling too much, but now you've really tightened up your game. I don't want to say too nitty because 12-10, I see 12-10s at 100 no limit, and they do just fine. So I think you're doing great. 12-10's fine if you want to open that up, and anywhere, for full ring, in my experience of what I've seen, I've seen a 20-15 crush the game, but usually it's the 15-12s, 15-13s, 16-13s that are at the top end of how loose they are, down to, 12-10's about as nitty as you can go to be successful, I think. But that's just one person's opinion there. Aggression, definitely good aggression numbers. And it looks like, you stay pretty consistent between turn and river, which I think is actually a pretty good thing. Your 3-bet number is fantastic, 5.5%. I like that. It's actually something I'm trying to increase myself. But, when I play 19 tables at a time, I tend to play a little nittier than I probably should. So I really like this. Fold to 3-bet at 71%, I think is actually really good, and that's a really nice area. You want to respect 3-bets no matter where you play at, even at these micro stakes, as I learned when I put in a ton of hands at 25 no limit. People aren't 3-betting light, so it's good that you're recognizing that. It looks like you hit a bunch of sets. Usually that should be 11.5%. It's not something you can control, obviously. So you ran a little hot. Looks like you hit a few sets, maybe 1 or 2 more than usual, so it's not a huge deal. I remember that because one time there's a friend of mine online who posted this graph of like, oh, I'm crushing 200 no limit. It's awesome. And I asked to see his stats, and I said, well, what was your set percentage? And it was 22% over 20,000 hands. It was just ungodly how awesome he ran. Sometimes you want to pay attention to some of these things. So let's see. Went to showdown, 25%. That's about right. Flop C-bet, 66. That's actually pretty good. No one's folding. That's fine. And let's see. Turn C-bet, went to showdown, won money at showdown. Steal percentage is a little low. 20% I think can be a lot higher. But again, not having played 10 no limit, I'm not sure how often people are folding their blinds. If they're folding their blinds a lot, you should be stealing a lot more. Obviously, it makes logical sense. Let's see here. Folding big blind to steal at 96% is way too much. Ideally, in an ideal world, 80-85% is kind of high. So if you see someone steal a lot and they fold a lot to 3-bets, then you should be polarizing your range to bluffs and value your hands. And you could see a really good video if you have a Stocks Poker membership made by a guy named Clean, who's a fantastic coach, and he specifically addresses this situation. So Just look for more spots to defend your big blind. But it might have been the case because it's such a small sample of hands where you just didn't get the case to do that. I now brought up a breakdown of the hands played by position. So we can see your position stats, and ideally you get looser and more aggressive as you have better and better position, which is something I see when we look at 3, 4, 5, and 6. Early on, it looks like you're pretty nitty. That's good. And then later on, you get very loose, and that's awesome. I'm loving your play on the button, even though you didn't show a profit. I think you're doing fine. I think maybe this went to showdown number. Might be a little high, and it looks like when you did get there, you didn't fare too well, which is too bad. But, I think it's fine. You're on the right track is what I'm saying. So it'd be interesting to see this played out over 10,000 or 20,000 hands. The small blind and big blind is kind of interesting to me because it looks like you're calling a lot in the small blind, but not in the big blind, which is, this is a worse position than this. And you're 3-betting more in the small blind as you are in the big blind. So this might be the case where you just got more hands in the small blind than you did the big blind, but it looks like you're just more comfortable in the small blind maybe. So take a look at that and maybe see and assess within yourself if that's going to be the case. Be interesting to see some of these button plays here. Let's take a look at a few of these hands. Okay, so usually I break up the stats and the hand replays between the 2 10-minute sections of the video, but this time I'm just going to go for some hand histories and see what you did when you were on the button, and then we'll take a look and just kind of break it down by position. So aces on the button, this is pretty obvious what you should be doing. Yeah, okay, that hand played itself, so that's fine. Ace queen on the button, very good 3-bet. Guy limp calls. Middle pair, this is a tough one, but given that he's a 41-6 here, almost always ahead here, because he's flatting that with weird pocket pairs and random ace hands that you have crushed. So slowed it down a little bit, and he shows up with queen 9. So I think let's go back to turn. So here we are at the turn, and he flatted your c-bet, and you're not sure what he had, and I know you're worried he had a king, which is fine. But at the same time, you've got a good hand, and you're way ahead of his range. So I think, the old, bet fold is the key to winning at the micro stakes kind of applies here. And I'd definitely throw in a bet here. Certainly Jack 10 would be flatting there, so there's some draws. But it's going to be a lot of random aces. It's going to be a lot of random pocket pairs, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, maybe even 9s or 10s. There's just a bunch of hands that he could have that you definitely have beat. So you go ahead and check it. And then I think for sure, if you check the turn, you've got to bet a little bit here for value on the river. But you check it down, just fully scared that he had a king. But you held up anyway. But I probably would have thrown it about $3, somewhere in there, just to get more value for your queen and not get yourself in a really, really tough spot if he, threw in a $5 or even shoved the river here. What would have been the deal then? I guess he would have folded. All right, 8's on the button. Good raise. And you hit your set. Pretty standard. Not sure about the min bet. I think just 3 times his bet's fine there. And now it's time to get him in. Not bet $1. He's not going anywhere. Then I hit quads. And this has to be a bet that you put him all in with. Because, if he's going to call 250, if he calls 130, he's calling 250. So keep that in mind. All right, 8's again. And you get 3-bet. From a guy who looks pretty nitty. We have 168 hands on him somehow. And this is the first time he's ever 3-bet from the small blind. Calling behind here is a little dicey, to be honest with you. Just because this guy, he 3-bets overall 4%, which is super thin. It's just his monsters. So I'd be apt just to let this one go.